Good morning and welcome to the Point. Again in Lansing this week, the talk was about roads and how to fix them. Just more than a week after that big defeat of Proposal 1, House Republicans rolled out what they say is their plan to fix roads, and it relies very heavily on new revenues that they expect to come in over the next several years. Something that Senator Jim Ananich, the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, said was fantasy. But we start this morning with the House Appropriations Chairman. Al Pashoka says that after the revenue estimating conference on Friday and with some other cash he believes they've found, there could be more money going into roads this year despite that vote.
I think we can find another 140, 150 million in the existing budget that we're going to pass in the next couple of weeks to get us to about 300 million. That's part of it. I think that's a good down payment. I think it shows the public that, look, we're going to squeeze every dime we can out of this budget, out of general funds. It is a priority, but we're going to have to find some other dollars to do the rest of it.
One of the reasons that I wanted to come back to talk to you is not just because you understand the budget, but you gave such a clear explanation of how little room there is to work within that $50 billion budget. And given those constraints, you're really down to just the general fund portion is really unless anybody would ever suggest taking money out of K through 12, and I think that would be political suicide. So when you talk about monies, you're really dealing with $10 billion, but it's not $10 billion.
Well, it's not, and then we use about $3 billion of that to get the federal match. So we're looking at about $6.2 billion. And out of that, you got about $2 billion that goes to corrections, $1.5 billion to higher ed, about $1.5 billion to pay down debt. Then we run 14 state departments on another $1.2 billion. So as you add it up, it gets a little tight. There's not a lot of extra general fund revenue there.
So as a matter of opinion, not necessarily policy, is there any way, technically, of course there is, but is there any way that gets to 56 votes that you can get to $1.2 or $1.3 billion without more revenues?
I have a nuclear option. I can show what $1.3 billion in cuts looks like, and it is bloody. To answer your question, can I get 56 votes on $1.3 billion worth of budget cuts? No way.
So if it really is $1.3 billion that is needed in the roads, and that number, both opponents and supporters of this last proposal seem more or less to agree on, give or take $100 million here and there. So if that's the number, then somebody is going to have to write a bigger tax check.
Or we're going to have to look at all the existing credits and all the different credit programs that are in the restricted pot and start looking at some of those, whether it's earned income tax credit, property, home heating, all of these different credits that cost the state money, we'll have to take a really strong look at.
You know that when you start looking at those kind of credits, what your friends on the other side of the aisle are going to say. They're going to say you can't take money from the most vulnerable in our state to pay the roads just because the people who can afford to don't want to pay for them.
Right. It'll be a political poison around here. It'll be very difficult to try to come up with $1.3 billion, but you know, the longer we wait, the worse this is going to get. If we could have gotten $500 or $600 million 4 or 5 years ago, we wouldn't be in as bad a shape as we are. So my position is we got to get started on this. So no more lollygagging, no more pictures of potholes, no more ads saying how bad it is. Let's sit down, let's get to work, let's solve this problem, and let's do it now.
You may not be able or willing to answer this, but in the months that have ensued since the lame duck legislature came up with this proposal to put it on the ballot, I have not found one person who would privately sit down and talk and say, yeah, this is going to pass. This proposal was in a lot of trouble from the get-go. Was there any surprise in Lansing that Proposal 1 failed? I mean, maybe surprised by the margin, but was there any real hope that that was going to pass, certainly in the last 30 days of that?
I think that the margin was a little bit surprising. The fact that it didn't pass, there was too many moving pieces. It was too easy to say, I don't like that one thing, and therefore I'm going to vote no. That's kind of what legislators are faced with every day. You look at a package of stuff, there might be one thing out of 12 that you don't like. Are you going to let the good be the enemy of the perfect, or the perfect be the enemy of the good? Those are the decisions that we have to make here every day. And I think the public looked at it and said, you know what, I don't like that. If I'm confused at all, I'm a no.
And that really is the history of proposals in the state of Michigan and elsewhere. If there's any confusion, if you have a question, then you become a no, or you don't go vote one way or the other. So now it's left with the legislature. The idea that anything is going to come together in the short term seems unlikely. You, I believe, said, hey, let's stay here through the summer and try to get this done. Is that really going to be the nucleus, or do the leaders need to stay here during the summer and come up with something that they can get 56 and 20 and 1? Or is it really going to be more collaborative?
I think we've got to start it now. And I think the leaders have to sit down. I know the speaker's got some ideas. I think Senator Meekhoff's got some ideas. And I think we need to sit down now and start building that collaboration with the governor's office, and let's come up with something by the middle of June.
If this process is not successful, and I'm not suggesting in any way that it won't be, but I know how difficult, the only thing more difficult, I think, for some people than raising taxes, voting to raise taxes in this body, is voting to cut spending. It's a very difficult thing to get people to do. If you can't come together with some kind of a plan that does more than maybe use the excess money that you're talking about and putting that in there, what is the net effect on Michigan roads? Because I think it's pretty obvious that they're deteriorating. Of course, it's springtime, so it always looks worse and feels worse, but they have gotten appreciably worse.
What we don't want to do is some 1 or 2 year Band-Aid and then try to sell the public on the fact that we fixed the roads. This got to be something that's long-term, it's sustainable, the dollars are there, we can show you that the dollars are there, and we can show you that the dollars are actually going to roads and not to other parts of the budget.
Senator, it's not like we haven't discussed this before, but Michigan's roads aren't any better than they were, and I don't know, I'll let you guess, if we're any closer to a solution to that.
I'm hopeful that we took a message last Tuesday from the voters that they want us to get serious. They don't trust us. And they want us to get serious and put together a plan that I think equally distributes the burden out to everybody. And that's a real long-term plan and a real long-term fix. Whether or not we're any closer to that, I don't know. But I'm hopeful that we take that lesson that the roads are getting worse every day. You look at this winter, it's much worse than it was last fall, and it's going to continue to get worse if we don't fix them.
What is that long-term plan? I appreciate the fact that in the Senate last fall, a gasoline tax was passed, raising the gasoline tax. Some say that's regressive because it's harmful for people who have less income, that more of it goes to the tax. Nonetheless, it was a bipartisan vote, if my memory serves correctly, and the House wouldn't take it up. Is that still kind of part of what the...
We did that twice. We did it once at the end of summer, and then once in lame duck, and then, of course, Proposal 1. So, I think my caucus is tired of sort of trying to be the responsible folks that are willing to compromise on bills. And, we want to make sure some of our views are held as well. I think we understood that gasoline tax is the traditional way of funding roads. But I think it's not the way of the future. As cars get more fuel efficient, as we're doing more hybrids and electric cars, it has a shelf life. I'm not suggesting that it couldn't be a piece of the puzzle, but I think as we go forward, we need to be a little more creative and a little more thoughtful. I think it's always a tradition. The discussion always goes down to, well, it should be sales tax, should it be gasoline, registration? Why does it have to just be those? Maybe there's more creative ways to come up with a way that shares the burden out. I don't exactly have a detailed plan right now, but I think we should look at things a little bit differently. And not to say that any of those things couldn't be components, but I don't think we should just look at it from that lens.
What about the House plan that was rolled out this week? This was a plan that makes assumptions on growth of the general fund for the vast majority of the money. It also deals with some restricted funds and also takes a big hit on some Democratic priorities like the earned income tax credit.
No question about it.
I'm guessing that your caucus isn't wild about it.
No, it's not. I got to be honest with you, it kind of reminds me of when I was a kid. I used to love to go to Walt Disney World, and Fantasyland was one of my favorite places to go, and I think we're taken back by that plan because it's based on projected growth, which basically means, for anybody that doesn't know what that means, school aid fund, local government. Because that growth, $700 million in the growth of government, which is basically what they're saying, growing government, $700 million, it's not going to come. Obviously I want to see the economy continue to do better, but basing it on sort of hopes and dreams is not the way to do it. We got to be realistic and come up with a real plan. And trying to to come up with a roads plan on the backs of working poor, which is exactly what the earned income tax credit is. That tax was put in place. Ronald Reagan said it was the best anti-poverty program out there, and getting rid of that is just a bad idea. It puts money right in people's pockets and they spend it in the community. That's the wrong tax to go after. That's the wrong tax increase as far as I'm concerned.
Where are we? You and I have had this discussion before about your relationship with the Senate Majority Leader and the relationship between the Senate and the House. This is a time when it's going to, at least from my position as an observer, it's going to take Democratic votes to get some of these things done too. But just this week, a bill that would remove prevailing wage from state projects was passed by the state Senate. That's obviously something you spoke pretty passionately about.
No question about it. And it makes it very difficult, if not almost impossible, for my caucus members to want to work to work on a comprehensive roads plan that includes raising taxes when folks just voted to lower the workers that would work on those roads' wages. I mean, this is very serious. I mean, prevailing wage ensures that local people in their local communities work on jobs like schools and roads that are highly skilled, and they deserve to have good wages. And to basically pass this bill that just gives huge profits to corporations, doesn't save the taxpayers isn't proven that it saves them any money. I think it was really the wrong move, and I was disappointed by it.
So here we are. It is May. The budgets are moving along. There are big things out there. Auto no-fault reform, the prevailing wage that we spoke of, and obviously this roads bill. Traditionally, by the end of May, first part of June, you guys would be kind of buttoning up the paperwork and getting ready to go back and do constituent work and the rest of the summer activities.
Sure.
What happens this year?
Well, I'm hopeful that we work through the summer and get this done, if we can't get it done before then. I mean, if we decide that we really want to focus and put all the games away and really get down and get to work for the people, I think we can come up with a good budget. I think we can come up with a roads plan that works, and I think we can start working on growing middle class wages, not taking them away. Now, they haven't taken a lot of steps in that direction towards me, but I do have a good relationship with the Majority Leader, and I'm going to continue to have that. We just had a strong disagreement today about this issue. But I'm hopeful that the governor will continue to keep his pledge that he'll veto this bill if it gets to his desk, and we can start working on real solutions.
So the Republicans' offering this week was not the final word, but really a reboot to the conversation about how to fund roads. And that's not the only thing going on in Lansing. We've got more when we come back after this. Welcome back to the Point. As you heard in our first segment this morning, it wasn't all about roads in Lansing this past week. In fact, the Senate voted to repeal the prevailing wage law, something Democrats don't like at all. But there's another big issue that is boiling, and that is auto no-fault reform. This morning, two Republicans with two very different takes on what should happen there.
This is my third term on the House Insurance Committee, and the third time I've seen this issue come before us. It's a very important one. We have got to figure out how to make auto insurance more affordable while providing quality care to those who are injured in accidents. And I think this legislation does that. It does so in just a few ways. Number one, we are putting reasonable limits on how much earnings a family member who provides 24-hour care to their loved one can earn. We're also putting in a fraud authority. Michigan is one of 12 auto no-fault states, but we're also the only state in the nation that doesn't have a central fraud authority, and I think that's something that everybody on both sides of this issue really believes is important. A couple other things that this does: it does put cost containment on for services or for charges that healthcare providers can make on services to those who are injured in an auto accident, because what we're finding is a lot of times those services are charged astronomically higher rates, in some cases 4 times higher for patients who are injured in an auto accident versus those who were injured in another fashion. And then the final thing it does, which is really important, is it requires a 2-year $100 per vehicle cut on insurance premiums for Michigan motorists. So we think that will help, that immediate cost relief will help provide competition as well as long-term cost savings.
In Lansing, issues very often create a lot of conversation on both sides, but hardly anything creates the kind of division that this does. And it's not along party lines, because there are some of your colleagues that are not on board with this. What is the argument? I've heard from some stakeholders that say, well, wait a minute. If you cap some of these costs, they're going to be shifted elsewhere and other people are going to have to pay them anywhere. The savings of $100 per car is not guaranteed going forward. What do you say to their arguments? Because we know each time this has come up, the arguments are largely the same.
This shouldn't be a partisan issue, and in fact it isn't, but it's an important one, and people feel very strongly on both sides. The simple truth is Michigan has the highest auto rates in the entire nation, and we have to figure out how to make those rates more affordable, because we have 1 in 5 people in this state that are not insured that need to be, and that puts extra strain on the system, creating more unsustainability. I also think it's really important to make sure we're very, very clear to people so that they know none of the benefits are going to be changed. Nothing changes for those currently in the system. Those patients who are catastrophically injured will not see any change in their benefits or how they are treated and how their care is provided. In fact, this legislation actually continues the unique, one-of-a-kind, unlimited personal injury protection for Michigan motorists.
Is there in this, and I appreciate not in this, but in this conversation, any talk about the overall costs? Because again, people who are opposed to this are quick to point out, look, the vast amount of money that you pay in your premiums goes for the other stuff, for the collision and for all of those kind of things, and that those are the costs that have driven Michigan to the highest automobile insurance rates in the country. Is there, again, I know not included here, but is there a conversation about something that can be done about that?
Well, there's definitely those questions have been asked, and the conversation has been had as it relates to the cost of collision coverage versus the cost of healthcare coverage in our insurance rates. The difference is we don't require a certain level of collision coverage. That is more for the consumer to decide, whereas when it comes to the healthcare coverage, that's a mandate that it has to be unlimited coverage that we purchase. And with the high cost of healthcare, those rates are going to continue to grow and grow.
I don't want to have to put you in the position of looking into a crystal ball, and we never know precisely how the legislature is going to react or act. But right now it would appear, and I'm not a real bean counter, but it would appear that the votes in the House may not yet be there. Is this something that's going to take a while to get done?
In the House, we're going to take our time so that we're making sure every member is educated on the issue, the background. I also am doing some diligence in reaching out to some of our healthcare providers locally, trying to bring them to the table and see if there are areas where we can agree on, and also have communications and conversations about where we go from here with the legislation. So I think what we're seeing is an education of our members, also trying to negotiate and communicate with opponents like the healthcare providers. But I just think it's too important to not get done, and I'm very hopeful. We have to find a way to make our insurance more affordable and provide quality care. And I think this legislation, especially because those who are injured are not going to be impacted in terms of the amount of benefits they receive, I think this legislation does that.
We were just talking before we started about reforming the no-fault auto insurance, and it is a subject that I have covered in this building and in the Anderson building and the Capitol building, I don't know how many times over the course of years. It continually bubbles up, but it never seems to get too far, and you're one of those that thinks that maybe it shouldn't get too far this time around.
Well, it's not that I don't think it should get too far. I think we need to define the problem. I think the solution on the table is still looking for a problem out there. There is a problem, but the solution on the table isn't going to address that problem. I talk to my constituents. What's the biggest issue with our auto insurance? The rates.
Cost, sure. I
have multiple cars in my family. I have 3 boys, all under 21. I am paying a lot of dollars for my auto insurance. I am one with my constituents that want to lower auto rates. What's proposed right now doesn't do that, and that's basically how I rate whether this is a good bill or a bad bill, and that's why I voted no.
Can you get to that cost savings and keep no fault in general? Because Of the 12 states or so that have no-fault insurance, aren't they among some of the highest costs?
Yes, but we also have some of the best benefits. If any of my children were ever in a catastrophic car accident, for $13 a month that we pay as citizens for that catastrophic care coverage, they're taken care of with the best care ever. Mary Free Bed, Hope Network, and many other areas that help rehabilitate these children, adults, whoever's in a car accident, catastrophic car accident, so they can lead good quality of life after such an incident. So you got to look at the benefits too. But there's a cost to it. And boy, I still think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, and there was some of it in this bill, but I think the overall trying to put some sort of cap on what you can charge, boy, in my eyes, is not very conservative way of going about things.
All right, well, so let me tell you a couple of things that the supporters say, and you tell me what your take is. First of all, they say there is a cost savings of at least $100 per car on the first 2 years. You disagree? You're laughing.
Well, it's not in the bill right now. It's in a proposal. So what's on the table right now doesn't have any of that information on there. $100 this year and $100 next year, and then the potential of jacking those rates back up. I want something a little bit more sustainable than that. Would I like to save $200 over 2 years? Great, but I think there's a better way to do that than what's proposed. I think it was a bone that they threw to get a couple votes, to tell you the truth.
Proponents also say that the cost of caring for people in automobile accidents is vastly more expensive than if, for example, I fall on the curb versus an automobile accident. Do you agree with that assessment?
You're saying that the cost to take care of
if I go in for an MRI,
yes,
you've heard
right.
the commercials.
Oh, yeah.
You know, if I go in for an MRI because I hit my head on the sidewalk, it's one cost.
Right.
If I go in on an automobile accident,
Right.
it's another cost.
Well,
Is it?
Yeah. I had owned a small business for a while, and there were services and products that I knew that I had to charge less for because I had other products and services that had better margins. And they equal out to make sure that you're providing good service and good products to your customers. Right now, if you're on Medicaid, the doctors and the hospitals are getting paid less than 50 cents on the dollar. You can't operate that way. So if there's a chance to balance that out, I have no problem with someone being able to charge more for other products and other services. Now,
well, but the question is the exact same service for two different injuries. I mean, the same injury caused by different reasonings. Should that be a higher cost because it's an automobile?
I just don't think that the government should be controlling that. I would much rather see, hey, here's a $10 million cap. Now the consumer's in charge. The consumers that is part of that dreadful accident now knows that for the rest of that person's life or the rest of your loved one's life, I have to make sure that I stay below that cap. Now I become a more conscious consumer, making sure that I'm getting products that are higher value. And I think those are the best cost controls, is when you put the consumer in charge.
Do you anticipate that actually something does get done with this, either this plan which you don't like or another plan that you would like better? Is this the year that something happens with no fault?
I would like to see it. I'd like to see it for our ratepayers. I really would. I think there's some good ideas out there that are definitely going to help out the ratepayers. Are the insurance companies going to be completely satisfied? Probably not. Are the hospitals? Probably not. Are the brain injury? Probably not. But I think if we have a serious talk, we can find a balance that long term our auto insurance rates can come down, and that's my goal.
Those are just a couple of the big issues we're following in Lansing. We've got more to the point in just a minute. So those are two of the big issues that we're following in Lansing, and there is a lot more to happen, but we're following roads very carefully and what, if anything, happens to funding. See you next week. To the point.